Greetings, MacNNers. It's time once again, actually for the last time in 2015, I'm sorry to say, for your favorite podcast and mine, episode 45 of the MacNN Podcast. Welcome back, MacNNers. Always a pleasure to have you with us. Don't worry, we will be back in 2016, but we just felt like because our usual Friday recording days, it's Friday, December 18th right now, next Friday will be the 25th. And the Friday after that will be New Year's Eve. So, no. We got other things to do, I'm afraid. We're booked.
Yeah, like see Star Wars 5 more times.
So we've got some things we need to take care of, and so we will return with the MacNN podcast in 2016. We'll, of course, one more thing will carry on, as they do.
Yeah, because those suckers record on Wednesday.
Yes, but they take a little break, and so I think they're only going to do one more, and then they're done for the year.
We've got one more of them this year, that's right.
And then our kind of oddball podcast, the third leg of this stool, is called Off Topic, and we're sort of going to rejigger it, apparently.
A little bit, yep.
Next year. Does that mean I'm fired? I think that means I'm fired.
Totally.
Damn it.
No, it doesn't, actually. I need a little more consistency, a little more order to that podcast rather than the shotgun blast of nerd society that it currently is. So we're going to be dealing with that a little tighter focus.
But I don't see how we're going to get away without one more shotgun blast of nerdity, which is to do with our next topics. So let's get on with that.
Okay, look, here's the deal. We're going to talk about Star Wars. We are not going to spoil you on this, all right? What we are going to spoil you with is the off-topic podcast that you'll be catching on Sunday. So you're actually listening to this on Monday. You could have listened to off-topic on Sunday and already been spoiled.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Lordy, does that off-topic podcast have spoilers? I'm just telling you right now.
Oh, man, it's loaded chock full of
Batten the hatches, hide the daughters, cover the ears of the women and children, because spoilers are going to be all about the off-topic podcast. And it's going to be spoilers about one specific thing, which is music. Music, our usual music. That's better. Anyway, Star Wars. Right. The Force Awakens. That's our big thing. Mike and I have both seen it. We were going to have William come in and tell us what he thought about it.
Oh, man. He got totally hosed, though.
But apparently his theater is run by the First Order, and so they cut the power.
It was resistance propaganda, so the power had to be cut, and they all had to be escorted out.
It's amazing. I didn't think this would happen. I can just imagine what that must have been like.
It had to be a mutiny. I can't even imagine that a movie theater full of fans reacted really well to, okay, you're 35 minutes in, here's a free voucher, get out.
Yeah. Really. I mean, yes, you'll get to see it eventually, and I'm sure he'll have some thoughts on that topic. But in the meantime, it's just Mike and I that have seen the film. I went to see it. I got a lot of mileage out of this line, I have to tell you, but I went to see it at a 1:20 in the morning, that's a.m., screening.
And it was still packed, wasn't it?
It was almost completely sold out.
Yeah.
But the thing about it was, there was two things. I loved, first of all, that as the woman handed me my ticket for the 1:20 a.m. screening, she went, "This movie gets out at 3:55 a.m. Very good. When do I have to be at work? Oh, yeah. But I have a job where I can call in Star Wars. Ah, so nice.
You have a benevolent boss.
One of the few perks of something of a slow news week allowed me to go see Star Wars. But also, I just didn't want Mike to be the only guy on the staff and not be able to talk about it a little bit. So, Mike.
I'd be oscillating like 120 kilohertz the entire week if I didn't get a chance to talk about it. So
let me start with you, because I don't, me, I have opinions and they just go on for days. So rather than that, let's start with you. I would like your, as spoiler-free as possible, review of Star Wars: The Force Awakens.
Okay, here's the situation. PG-13 movie, I'm fine with that. Okay. Mm-hmm. It was a little more Saving Private Ryan with the visceral violence than I thought it was going to be. I mean, we're not talking like stormtrooper bits flying off or anything like that.
Couple places.
A lot of burn holes, a lot of blood, a lot of, no gore. So I'm less comfortable showing this to my school-age children than I would have been otherwise. If you think about episodes 4 through 6, the violence is sanitized. The violence is very clean violence.
Yes.
So my children are not going to see this on a larger-than-life screen. I saw this in Washington, D.C. I saw it at the Smithsonian IMAX Theater.
Nice.
Oh, man. And I think I'm going to see if I can't somehow convince them to play all the other Star Wars movies.
Yeah.
And just let me go watch them there. I mean, it's just,
was it in 3D?
you know what? I'm not down with the 3D. So no, it was not. It was just an IMAX, no 3D.
Just IMAX.
My traveling companion is slightly crippled and was on crutches, so we were a bit slower than we normally would have been. So man, were we close to the screen. So we actually had to turn our heads to read the entire opening scroll.
Oh, wow. You were close.
Yeah, we were pretty close. The movie, if you think about episodes 4 through 6 and the cinematography and the pacing, this is very much a 21st century movie. The pacing is bam, 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 bam. And there's always something going on, and there's always something cluttering the scene. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's not necessarily a good thing either. It really depends on your view of filmmaking, your view of modern filmmaking versus 1970s filmmaking. It's very clear, even with the special editions, that episodes 4 through 6 were made in the 70s and early 80s. Yeah. Just the style and the pacing of the filming. And it's also very clear that this was made in the 21st century because of the style and the filming.
Also, I think a big factor on this film is what your relationship is with the first 3 movies that came out in the 70s and 80s, which, just to avoid confusion, are episodes 4, 5, and 6, right?
Yes.
There, I've avoided confusion. So this carries on from that trilogy very much. And of course, I think most people have figured that out. And sort of ignores largely the prequels.
I think that the distance in the timeline of Star Wars between the prequels and now, it's got to be 60 years, maybe even 70.
Yeah, it's a fair point. Very fair point there.
So I think we're looking at the distance between World War II and now.
Wow.
While it is possible that there are Clone Wars survivors of humanity. I mean, I have no idea how long humans live in the Star Wars universe. I'm an utter nerd, but I'm not quite that far along. You know, they're old. And like there are characters in episode 7 that predated the Clone Wars, and Yoda predated the Clone Wars, but he wasn't in this, you know.
Oh, now you're spoiling it for everybody.
Oh, come on. Yoda died in Return of the Jedi. That's not a big shock. But in any event, as far as the human characters go, and the universe is mostly populated with humans, that's, you know, I suppose that's our right as the filmmaking species, I suppose. You got to assume the lifespan is 100 years. So if you're 100 years old, then you were 30 years when the Clone Wars were going on. So it's just not, I don't have a problem with how they kind of lightly touched on the Clone Wars. But the thing is J.J. Abrams actually spoke about Star Trek just yesterday about this, saying, oh, yeah, I mean, I took some liberties with the universe and I regret taking some of them. And I think he did the same. I think he picked and chose what he wanted, not only from existing canon, but I also think that he picked from the extended universe books that Disney decided that they were going to eradicate from canon liberally as well.
Yeah, I caught a couple of mentions. I'm not as familiar with the expanded universe as some people, but I caught a couple of references. But my impression was that they left behind most of it.
But going on to Mac News now, okay, let me just make my final point here. And if you want more in-depth breakdown of this, you're going to have to listen off topic. The movie stands alone if you are one of the approximately 18% of humanity that has not seen a Star Wars movie. You can see this and you're not missing out on not having seen 4 through 6. And in some aspects, I think it may be a better movie if you had not seen any of the other Star Wars movies.
I can go along with that. My own quick impression, because I have a lot to say about this, but it has to be saved for off topic.
Yes.
But my own impression is that anybody who's worried that this will suck, no.
Yes, it does not suck.
You can sleep safely. Does not suck. You know, even if I have nitpicks, and of course I do, I'm a fan.
Yeah.
So, right. But even with the nitpicks, this is a fun movie to go to. It's well worth the money. Just the updated special effects and seeing some very old friends that do surprising things. And that's one of the things I like best about this film is I didn't get what the trailer brought me. You know what I mean? I got more. And that's always great.
That's fantastic. The trailer did not spoil the entire movie, not by a long shot.
No, I was quite surprised by that too. And that was great. The audience, I think that typical of these sorts of movies these days, the audience was very thrilled by the time the end credits rolled. And what was funny was there was in the age of Marvel superhero movies, we're all used to having a little bit of extra after the end credits. So a lot of people hung out at the end and got nothing. They
didn't let us at the Lockheed Martin IMAX. Seriously, like 3 seconds into the end credits, the big voice came on saying, "Get out, take your stuff." It was really quite. It was politely stern in a way only the Smithsonian can pull off.
Yeah. But if you would like to hear a little bit more in-depth critique of the film, good and bad, then I'd encourage you to check out this month's Off Topic.
Actually, it is technically this month's Off Topic.
Yeah.
We had to resurrect the podcast for 2 specific topics, and we will go over them again on Off Topic.
Our usual bailiwick, of course, is Apple news, iOS news, Mac news, that sort of thing, and trends generally in the technological world. But once in a while, a great disturbance in the nerd world is felt, and it must be addressed.
Nice for not going with the force on that one. I appreciate your restraint.
Yeah, we may have to do this again when the new Star Trek movie comes out.
I wouldn't count on it.
Yeah, let me just say this, though. Seems like a good time to be a dork these days, you know?
Yeah.
What can I say? We've got all kinds of cool tech this Christmas and 2 new movies to look at. So, yeah. All right.
Yeah, back to the boring stuff. Let's do it.
Back to technology. Moving on. So it finally happened. Apple Pay and Union Pay forged an agreement, Union Pay being China's largest payment processor and financial warehouse for all the different banks. And they've forged an agreement, and Apple Pay will be coming to China. Now, for most of us who don't live in China and that listen to this podcast, this may not seem like a big deal, but it is a huge deal.
It's giant, and it will make a huge bottom line to Apple. It'll, not necessarily this quarter,
no,
but for fiscal year 2016, for the remainder of Apple's fiscal year, it'll make a giant impact.
Yeah. One of the interesting things about this deal to me, Mike, is that China has only fairly recently, I mean, yes, there's been iPhones available in China for some time, but the momentum there really picked up with the iPhone 5 family and moving forward.
Well, Apple pushed it really hard.
Yeah.
This wasn't really, there have always been iPhones from the beginning, but they've kind of, they've trickled in across the border, they've come in suitcases, et cetera, until Apple said, all right, let's do this thing. The Chinese LTE is wacky, and that's part of the problem. And Apple came in and knocked their heads together and said, no, come on, you guys need to get together. You guys need to figure out the LTE in the country. And they did.
Yeah.
And then they did the same thing with the banking industry, and the banking industry fought back, and so did the government a little bit.
Yeah.
But now there's a deal struck, and I'm very sure it's favorable for the Chinese bank and the Chinese government. But I'm also sure that there's something in it for Apple.
Now, I don't happen to know the situation yet, but I have a source on this. I don't know the situation yet in terms of how many merchants in China already have the NFC-compatible terminals that they'll really need to take advantage of this. But here's the important point, is that most iPhone owners in China have an iPhone 5S, an iPhone 6, an iPhone 6 Plus. One of the Apple Pay compatible phones is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And Apple Watch apparently is doing fairly well there as well. So
yeah,
this is a generation that's coming out that will be ready to go when this technology is fully implemented.
And the United States is actually the laggard in credit card processing technology, not China.
I know. This is something I have to tell my U.S. friends all the time, is whenever I pull out one of my cards and it's got a chip in it, as they all do here in Canada, debit or credit, they're like, what's that? What's going on? Well, some of them are contactless, some of them aren't, but all of them have this chip and pin thing that is also known as EMV. Mm-hmm. And this is coming to U.S. cards. We're starting to see it roll out.
Mine does have, and the banking laws are requiring it for next year. But if you look at most of your point of sale locations at your supermarkets and things, you'll find the chip and pin slot underneath the number pad. But in a lot of places, it's just not enabled.
Yeah.
I mean, and oddly, it's at my thrift store, it's enabled, but at 2 of my supermarkets, it's not.
Right. Now, the chip and pin system, for those of you who haven't gone through this, because I just few months ago, I just got a bank card from my U.S. bank account, and it still didn't have a chip in it.
Really?
Yeah.
No kidding.
I called them up. I was like, you know about this law, right? They're like, we're not doing it until we have to. I was, all right, okay. But anyway, the process is you stick the card in the slot and then put in a PIN number, and then the transaction goes through very much like you're used to. It's a little bit slower. It is actually quite a bit slower than this just swiping.
Yeah, it's significantly slower, but I don't really care.
But this sets the stage for point of sale terminals that can do contactless, and that's where you pull the card out and just tap it against the machine. You may have seen this at gas stations, oddly enough, have widely adopted this. And so you may have seen it there, but you just go boop, and that's it. And it's very quick, and that is as close to Apple Pay as you get while still having to fish out an actual card.
The DC Metro prefers NFC communication with their smart cards for fares.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's getting there in the United States, but it's slow.
Yeah. As I have mentioned on some of the articles, I use mine in Canada all the time, even though Canada doesn't officially support it yet except through Amex cards. But we've gotten many reader reports of people using it in all kinds of countries. As long as they have a U.S.-based card that supports it, it seems to work, because most merchants outside the U.S.,
right,
in the developed world at least,
right,
have these NFC terminals very widely. And so I'm really looking forward to the U.S. catching up with this. I really got a big thrill when I finally got to a Panera Bread down in the States and got the chance to use this damn thing.
Well, even some of the new things, even the new Square reader and things like that have NFC and chip and PIN integration. So
that's going to make a big difference. And I just want to say, for those of you who have not had the pleasure of using Apple Pay yet, using it on the phone is cool. Using it on the watch is super cool. 70s pimp badass music cool. That's how,
tell us how you really feel about it.
It really is. And I've been doing this for quite some time, but the thrill has not worn off a bit. And what's funny is once in a while, I'll get a cashier who hasn't seen it before, and they are just like, what did you just do? What was that? Is that an Apple Watch? Oh my God, everybody come here. Do it, buy something else.
Do it again, here's a pack of gum.
What I find amusing is, and I guess I should have expected this really, but so here's China sort of almost leaping out ahead of the U.S. if the U.S. doesn't get its act together, merchants. But the U.S. reaction is like, oh no, you know what we think would be better is to invent 72 other systems that are very similar but not quite the same.
Oh God, I know.
This is the 56K modem wars all over again.
Well, it's every standard in the United States is going to have some kind of battle.
Why do we have to go through this? It's so dumb. And last week on this very podcast, we talked about Walmart Pay, because that'll be big. And now this week we get Target Pay, or whatever they're going to call it.
I don't know. I mean, Target's still holding out on the Apple Pay thing.
Yeah.
The system looks remarkably like Walmart Pay, and the fact you have to generate a QR code and you have to have them scanned at the register.
Yeah. Again, for those of you who haven't encountered this yet, if you thought my description of chip and PIN took a while, get ready for QR code. Yeah.
Yeah, this is terrible. It's so many different communication steps have to be made to pay contactless at the register. And with Apple Pay and even Samsung Pay, your information is being harvested less than this, because the current C system, which both Walmart Pay and Target Pay are based off of, is entirely designed to harvest your user data.
Yeah.
What you bought, where you bought it, how much you bought it, how often you buy it.
Oh, and your financial data. I mean,
your financial data.
Your bank account stuff and all that. Yeah.
So,
and they're all going to put it in a big pool that won't ever be hacked, and and then share it with all the other merchants that are part of this system. Now, I can see why merchants like this idea, but I can't see why consumers would put up with it. It's slower, it's more awkward, it compromises your data a great deal more, and it's just generally awful. Now, there is one advantage to the currency system. I should mention it right up front, because it is a big advantage, and that is that it will work with almost every smartphone out there.
Yeah, low end, high end doesn't matter. It will work with,
That's why they have to do the whole QR. The cash register generates a QR code, and you take a picture of it with your phone, and then you show it to the cashier, and that makes the magic, and a child is born 9 months later. I don't know. But
ironically, though, the country that does not need the lowest common denominator appealed to is the United States, because of Apple's dominance in the smartphone market.
Yeah.
So I just don't see where it's going to get much of a toehold.
Yeah. The only good thing about this is it does give even those merchants more inspiration to install these sort of updated terminals. But of course, they're going to turn off the Apple Pay the NFC capability, which will also shut out Android Pay, Samsung Pay, Google Wallet, and some of the other mobile phone systems that really should not be shut out. And then their customers will complain. I have an iPhone right here. Why can't I do this?
And how much the companies care about that, I really don't.
And here's the other thing. Walmart, we talked last week about how Walmart customers may not adopt this in the numbers that Walmart might think they will, for a variety of reasons, one of which being it's slower. Target, I seem to remember something about them and customer data and a breach and credit cards and
It was a big one. It was last year about this time. It was a massive, massive breach.
Right. Now, admittedly, I have a longer memory than most of the American public on these sorts of things, but I really, really don't think a lot of people are going to trust Target Pay.
I'm willing to bet that it's not going to be enough to sustain it, and it will quietly go away.
Yeah, I think they're determined to try it their way for a while and then eventually give it up.
Well, they've got money in the whole currency system. They're one of the founding partners of the currency system.
Yeah. But I mean, even Best Buy, who was also one of the founding partners, has bailed on the idea. And the reason they have, well, first of all, they're an electronics firm. So naturally, they should embrace these other systems that we're talking about, not just Apple Pay. But the other problem is that, Best Buy knows about Apple people.
Yeah.
And CVS found out real quick about Apple people. They don't like it when you take their options away.
That's a true statement.
So there aren't that many Mac users in the world. But there are a lot of iPhone users. And, once Apple Pay starts becoming a thing, which it has not yet, but once Apple Pay starts becoming a real thing, a mainstream thing, they're going to want it everywhere.
True enough.
You can have your system if you want, but you need to also open up Apple Pay. That's the bottom line on that. So, merchants, you've been warned. We'll be back here next year making fun of you. All right, see you then. Next up, death, taxes, and Apple.
The gift that keeps on giving, Ireland and Apple.
Oh, I know. Well, that's part of a larger topic. And I thought, we haven't seen it yet, but we've only seen a clip at this point. But on Sunday, Apple CEO Tim Cook gave, I have to use past tense because you're listening to this later, he gave an interview to 60 Minutes. There was also another feature about Sir Jonathan Ive, but we're not talking about that right now, where he laid out his case about why Apple handles their foreign profits the way they do and why they don't what's called repatriate it back into the United States, although it was never in the United States the first time, so I'm not sure how you bring it back. But anyway, the point is that Apple is thought of as a U.S. company because it's based in the U.S., even though it is a global firm. Two-thirds of the money Apple makes is actually made outside the United States. And so they have, conservative estimate at the moment, by the way, $200 billion. I almost have to do that with my Dr. Evil pinky. $200 billion.
You see, here's the thing. Jumping off the train for just a second.
Sure.
You and I were both dealing with Apple and customers and everything in the 90s when things were dark and Apple's rooting around in the sofa cushions for change.
Yeah.
So these numbers are still, my brain still goes, yeah, okay, that's not billion, that's million, right? But yeah, it's billion. I mean, the company's had such a radical reversal of fortunes in the last 15 years.
It is the single greatest comeback business story of all time, at least so far. And, it would be sort of like somebody inventing a radical new use for oil that made it just 10 times more valuable than it is now.
Anyway, yes, let's get back on the topic.
But the point is that Apple's got tons of money stashed overseas. They don't do this, and this is the point that Cook always makes, they don't do this to avoid paying taxes on it. They didn't earn it in the United States. End of story. And because of the way the tax laws are set up in the United States, without getting too much into it, it would cost them an enormous portion of that money to bring it in. So they just, looking at historically low interest rates versus taxes, they have an actual fiduciary responsibility not to do that. And so that money stays in foreign bank accounts. And they pay taxes on it there, whatever deal they can get. And yes, they do take full advantage of the tax laws outside the United States. But within the United States, and this is the important point, they pay about 26% of all the profits they make in the U.S. in taxes. So as Tim Cook said, by virtue of them being one of the largest companies and most profitable companies in America, they are paying more taxes than most other companies in America, including some very big names you'd be quite surprised to find out how little they pay. And this goes back to an even larger issue, which I'm not going to get into deeply, but back in the 70s, corporations paid about 30% of all the revenue that the government collected in the form of taxes. Now they pay 10%. And Apple seems to be shouldering a fair portion of that. So I have to say that I'm not just siding with Apple because we like Apple on this particular issue. The point that Tim Cook has been making is that the laws, they don't need to lower the corporate tax rate to 0 and just give everybody a holiday. What they need to do is reform some of these laws, and I'm in complete agreement with them. The Obama administration had put out a couple of years ago now a proposal to just permanently lower the corporate tax rate from just over 35% to just about 25%. But they would also close a lot of these loopholes that companies can currently exploit. Well, like you run your sales through some island nation and then you don't have to pay U.S. taxes because technically your corporation is located in Bermuda and not the United States. Come on. Now, Apple doesn't do that trick. They do something like it in Europe, but they don't do that here in the United States. So I think the bottom line is that Tim is actually right. And that's exactly why when he was called up before Congress 2 years ago to testify, he gave his testimony and nothing happened. Because there isn't anything to do. He stopped short of saying, this is your fault, you, Congress.
But the thing is, it is. It is. If the thing in Ireland, they're being investigated by the European Commission because of the tax practices. But the thing is, it's legal under Irish law.
Yes.
So the companies are operating, if the companies are operating within the law, it is not up to the companies to say, okay, there's this law and we're paying fewer taxes. So, we're just going to kick back some extra money just because we want to lose some more.
Yeah.
You want it changed and change the damn law.
Right.
It's that simple.
Right.
And, that's simple, right? In air quotes, because nothing is ever simple with laws.
Politics. No, but what it was Ireland went through a very tough economic time, as a lot of countries did a few years back, and they decided the one way to get out of that was to lower the tax rate, the corporate tax rate, very low for foreign corporations.
Yeah.
So Apple took advantage of that.
They were in Ireland before.
Apple's been in Ireland for decades. They didn't just sail in because the tax rate suddenly became attractive. It happened to benefit them. But as far as we can tell, and we've looked into this, the European Commission may know something we don't, but as far as we can tell, Apple did not get a special deal. A lot of tech companies got a special deal.
Well, yeah, time will tell when the European Commission gets all their questionnaires back. And the thing is, the European Commission has now decided to punt this until after the Ireland election cycle is completed. So now it's not going to be an election. More politics.
Yeah.
And Tim said in front of 60 Minutes that it was political crap. And he's right in every regard. This is exactly political crap. The governments of the world make these policies so the companies say, okay, and then they cry foul because they're not making enough money from the company being in their borders. That's
political crap.
Yeah, I was going to really get foul-mouthed on that one, but I decided to restrain myself.
I just want to say one other thing about this. America, I lived there for most of my life, but I now live in Canada most of the time. And America is one of the very, 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 very few, as in like the only one or maybe two countries where citizens who earn money outside the United States still have to report that income to the United States and pay taxes on it. This is on an individual basis, so this is quite a bit different than a company like Apple. But that double taxation is exactly what Cook is talking about.
States are wacky too. In some states, if you work in another state, it just turns into this nightmare of tax forms.
If Canada didn't give me a discount on my Canadian taxes because of the American tax thing, because America takes a share as well, that would make the whole situation untenable. And it is a very sore point between the two countries. Mm-hmm. So what I'm trying to say here is that this double taxation thing is at the root of the problem, not Apple's got a bunch of money and Congress would like 40% of it.
Well, they do, but
that's a problem too. But Apple's not the only company that has huge foreign profits. There's lots of others like that, Google to name but one. And again, they're almost forced by the fact that they have shareholders, they're almost forced legally to do everything they can to lower their tax bill as much as they can. And so it's not surprising, really, that this whole jobs shipping overseas and taxes being funneled through foreign subsidiaries and all that sort of thing happened. It was in the loopholes these legislators wrote. And instead of looking inward, they're looking out.
Yeah,
that's the bottom line.
Here's the thing. Amongst the full-time staffers, Malcolm is the least 6-color bleedy, and I'm probably next. I'm completely on Apple's side in this. The government's made the rules. Now they're hoisted by their own petard.
Yeah, basically.
And they're pointing the finger at Apple for being the problem, and that's nonsense.
Yeah. Of course, in a perfect world, they'd all get together, just close up these loopholes between. It's mostly about international law as much as it is U.S. law. But when Congress will finally get out of the business of crafting laws to benefit particular businesses specifically, that would be a good.
That would be good too. Yeah.
Anyway, we'll see. Maybe the next election will change everything. Oh, that was good.
Yeah,
I
like that.
Was fun.
Yeah, me too.
Moving on. Let's get technical. Oh, yeah. Once in a while, we talk about these big topic issues a lot, like the U.S. tax situation, and we're about to get on with encryption and freedom of speech and all that sort of stuff. Hey, Mr. Intellectuals, let's take it off the table a little bit and get down to the nitty-gritty and some specifics. Sometimes tech news can just be fascinating in its own right, even in the tiniest little ways, and this is a perfect example of this. Mike, you better start by explaining exactly what non-volatile memory host controller interface specification is, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, here's the situation. Let me just give a little background here. Apple uses PCIe storage is what they call it. And that's storage mounted directly on a fast speed bus. By buses, people think USB or they think serial ATA or something like that. But no, the SSDs on Apple's modern line of computers is basically straight on the PCIe bus. Now, this NVMe controller thing that we're talking about right now, there's now a generic driver. Apple's driver for their PCIe storage, which is also NVMe storage, in essence.
By the way, this is just as an aside, this PCIe method of SSD communication is about double the speed of you just putting an SSD in your 2012 MacBook Pro.
Yeah, it's actually a bit faster than that, but yeah.
Yeah.
So Apple's driver will only work with Apple's cards. End of story.
Right.
And if you've got an old slab side aluminum Mac Pro, you could get a PCIe SSD card and put it in there, but Apple's driver is not going to help you until now.
Ha ha ha.
Now there is a third-party driver signed. Okay, it's signed. No serious hackery is required, but it's not a simple installer.
It was based on Intel's open source driver, I believe you said.
It's based on Intel and another stealth startup. I'm going to do more air quotes here. Is how it's described, and we're going to put the link to the notes. But this is a very specific thing.
Yeah.
This is if you have one of these cards, one of these PCIe cards, or somehow magically you're putting OS 10 on an Intel motherboard that's not Apple's.
What? I didn't even think that was possible.
Oh, yeah, liar. we don't talk about it much, but yeah, it's doable. And so if you've got one of these machines, you can now use these cards. You can't use it on a slab side aluminum Mac Pro to boot, okay, unless somebody gets into EFI hacking, which this is such a spirally thing. There's so many dark alleyways we can go down on this.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is a third-party driver, much the same way most of OS 9's drivers were, for that matter.
Yeah.
And that allows you to use these cards for fast storage.
Right.
Now, they're not cheap. Oh, my God, are they not cheap?
Yeah, no, those PCIe cards are not cheap, but also I have found that particularly the slab side Intel Mac Pro owners really want to go the extra mile to keep those machines running as long as they can.
Oh, God, I love them so much.
Yeah.
I love tinkering. I've always loved tinkering. I put a 20 gigabyte IDE hard drive in a 6500 for my home server.
Right.
So I mean, I've been doing this kind of thing for a really, really long time.
Now, at the moment, you said something about the driver doesn't work with slab side Macs yet because of...
No, it works. You can't boot with it. You can't boot with it. It works for very fast storage, but you can't boot with it.
I see.
So, I mean, I'm going to be frank. The driver was written for the Hackintosh community because there are PC motherboards with NVMe slots on the board, sometimes more than one, sometimes 4 or 5 of these slots to use an M.2 SSD. But it works on it's signed. It's not an illegitimate driver. It's a legitimate driver. It requires a single line of terminal to completely install it. As far as difficulty of driver installs go, it's not as simple as double clicking. Hey, look, my printer driver's installed.
Yeah, no, but for the people who have any experience in trying to keep older machines going, they'll know how to handle this.
Yeah.
Also, I noticed that you said that it works with the the Thunderbolt expansion chassis.
It does. It does, in fact. If you have, like, the MacBook Pro with Thunderbolt, if you've got one of the PCIe expansion boxes,
right,
you can put in one of the NVMe cards into the expansion chassis, and now that's super fast SSD storage.
Yes, and because it's connected by Thunderbolt, you don't lose very much speed there. So
you can effectively saturate the Thunderbolt bus with input-output from the drive. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, see that I can just hear the toes curling of certain kinds of Mac hackers. I can't wait to try that out. That's great. And I just love that, essentially Apple developed a solution for this and then just kept it themselves. And the rest of the community said, challenge accepted.
Yeah. And I mean, there's a very specific, there's a very specific want for this. I'm not going to say there's a need.
No.
There's a very specific want for this, and they fulfilled it, and good for them. Good for them, I say.
Yeah.
You know what? You know what you should do? If you are a Mac user with a slab side Mac Pro, we're going to put the link in the show notes. You should look at everything connected to that link.
Yeah.
There are some other very interesting resources available at that site.
So, yeah, there you go. That's your week's bit of hackery there from your friends here at MacNN.
Yep.
All right. Next up, encryption, Apple, and BlackBerry. So we're getting kind of a mixed up fruit pie there.
So BlackBerry's quarterlies are out, and they're once again not good. The company's still bleeding cash. But earlier in the week, I don't know, perhaps as a distraction or something. I'm really not sure.
Oh, definitely is a distraction.
Chen went nuts about Apple's stance on encryption and non-encrypting unless... I mean, he kind of glossed over the fact that Apple will do the best they can if they get a warrant. He kind of skipped that point a little bit.
He also kind of skipped the fact that BlackBerry built its reputation on exactly that level of encryption.
Yes, and now he's kind of walking that back a little bit.
Because he has to. Yeah.
He doesn't have to, but he's got to do something to sell some phones. I mean, he's finally getting to the point where he's saying, if you don't buy our phones, we're done.
Yeah.
So he's finally getting to that point, which is frankly the point he should have been at a year ago.
Agreed.
It's such a muckraking, mud-slinging comment from the CEO of BlackBerry earlier this week about Apple's encryption stance. And I think it was intended specifically to generate headlines, because the headlines this week were not going to be great. And he knew it then.
Yeah, and he knew the kind of comments it would get, like, well, you're one to talk. This is literally a case of the pot calling the kettle blackberry.
Yeah, it really is. I see what you did there. I really wish you hadn't, but you did anyway, and that's all right.
It's the way my brain works, it can't be resisted.
I know, but
anyway,
this is the slow death spiral of BlackBerry.
Yeah, it's ugly to watch, and particularly living up here in Canada, where anything about BlackBerry makes the news.
Yeah, they're a natural resource like maple syrup and
they kind of are,
and mousse, right? I mean,
and so yeah, it's a little bit worrisome and troubling. But really, for those of you who care to dig into this, BlackBerry I think they helped sign their own death warrant when they were forced to decrypt communications in India, I believe it was. Mm-hmm. And then other countries said, well, if you can do it for them, you can do it for us. And so essentially now, I don't want to go as far as say we can't trust BlackBerry, but it kind of can't. Whereas at least Apple is, holding up this position and probably will until the bitter end, until they absolutely have to. I swear I think they will litigate this all the way to the Supreme Court if they have to.
I will give BlackBerry the credit for being the first company that realized that security was an issue.
Yes.
But I'll also give them credit for not seeing the writing on the wall when the iPhone came out.
Yeah. No.
Sticking with their guns is fine, but a certain amount of nimbleness is required in mobile, which they did not have.
Yeah.
When the computing power breakthrough came to mobile, when the iPhone came out and similar devices came out, in the later part of the aughts.
Right. This is we're talking a while now.
BlackBerry just didn't adjust. It literally took them 3 years to adjust.
Yeah.
And now it's too late.
This is the terrible thing. We talk about Windows a lot on this show, unusually, but because we think that Microsoft are making some really terrific products these days, but it may be too late. And I'd have to say about the same for BlackBerry. Of course, being up here in Canada, I get to see and play with BlackBerry phones all the time. And they're nice. They're really nice. And, ironically, the QNX system that BlackBerry developed for Ford and other clients for automobiles works apparently quite well with CarPlay and Android Auto and all that. So that's an area where, again, if they'd been faster on the draw, they could have upstaged both. There wouldn't really need to be as much of a push by Google or Apple to make Android and CarPlay as complete a system as it is, because it could have just fed into QNX, but oh well.
BlackBerry and Microsoft, both when the iPhone came out, said, nah, this is never going to work.
Yeah.
And didn't do anything about it for years. And BlackBerry just kept on keeping on, and Microsoft bought Nokia too little too late.
Yeah.
A review of the new Nokia Windows Phone that Microsoft just shipped said that it is the coffin that Windows 10 for mobile will be buried in.
Ouch.
Yeah.
That's man, that's some harshness right there.
It's tough. I mean, it's a solid, boring phone.
Well, I was thinking about more that it will be a bright yellow coffin.
Well, if you're into that kind of thing, then that's fine. But, it's an Apple world and we just live in it.
And this is the other thing that I want to point out is, sometimes we'll make fun of competitive services like Walmart Pay, which I still can't. It's funny to me.
Did you have to snort there? Did it have to be so obvious?
I did. But, competition is actually good.
I agree. And
I say this all the time.
If Microsoft didn't have Apple and Apple didn't have Microsoft, we would not be where we are computing today.
No. Very often things like this, like a great player like Apple comes out with something and everybody else says, we've got to up our game.
Yep.
So that's a good thing. And then very occasionally, but it happens, another company, what, not Apple, will come up with something and Apple go, damn. Oh.
Yeah, Google kicked down the door and altered the equation.
Yeah.
Then that's what this is. This is BlackBerry not being nimble enough to change, to evolve into a changing environment.
And this is why, for any of your Windows friends or Android friends who don't understand why Apple gets such a disproportionate amount of press, even though they're still not the world's largest selling platform. Why? Because they are seen as the leader. They're the ones taking the industry's places.
Right now.
Yeah, at least right now anyway.
It hasn't always been that way.
And it won't
always be that way.
Right. But at the moment, Star Wars seems to be taking the industry places now because everybody's looking at that movie and going, we need that kind of tech. Yeah.
Well.
There's a great, not to spoil anything, but there's a great line in the new Star Wars film where Han Solo says, I like this. You guys who've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Tech. That's tech. That's the tech industry. Moving on. We'll get to William Gallagher and his app of the week in just a moment. But first, we want to talk about, there's something big coming this week. No, I'm not talking about that movie. I'm talking about a holiday. A few days off. It's going to be great. Time with family, that sort of thing. But if you're anything like us, and I include Mike and myself in this, we generally put gift buying off for a lot of things until way too late in the game. Me particularly, because although I moved to Canada some years ago, every year, like Charlie Brown in the football, I completely forget that Canada Post cannot deliver things to the United States in a timely fashion. So really, if you want to make sure that somebody in the States gets a package from Canada in time for Christmas, you mail it at Thanksgiving, latest. So I literally got, and it works the other way around too, I literally got Christmas presents in February from relatives down south. So, but most of you live in the United States and are sending things to the United States, so you don't have that problem to deal with, but it is still getting close to the end. Luckily for you, there's a fair few things that you can pull out even as late as the day, Christmas Day, and still make it look like it was a thoughtful gift. Now, we've published a couple of different guides for this. One of them was drawn from our own MacNN deals, last minute suggestions from the MacNN deals, and we've seen some great prices on stuff. Malcolm did a bang-up job, and I think Mike helped him with some of the listings of stuff that have come out, some great cameras, some terrific prices on headphones and audio gear generally, and I kind of like that Jamstick wireless smart guitar. That, I can't play guitar, but if somebody gave me that, I would probably start. It's a real cool present.
Well, here's the thing. Material goods from MacNN deals, if you order Monday or Tuesday, if you pick the faster shipping, it will still get to you on time.
Ooh, that's nice. So now.
Yeah, do it right now.
Right now.
Don't wait. And if you're listening on like the 2nd or 3rd of January, you're a little late.
Yeah. And then the other gift guide, the MacNN gift guide for just plain old last minute deals. We talked a lot about cards because, what's beautiful about cards is there can be virtual cards or physical cards. So almost any store carries iTunes cards and almost everybody can use them. So that is certainly a great utilitarian present. Starbucks cards, cards. The movie theaters will all be open on Christmas Day, so you can run down and grab a card from them and give it to somebody. It's usually...
And go see the Chipmunks movie.
And go see the Chipmunks movie.
Just related to that, let me just toss this in here. A Facebook comment that was shared by one of my friends said that this will be the most savage theater beating of all time.
Star Wars versus Chipmunks?
Star Wars versus the Chipmunks.
Well, if it kills off the Chipmunks franchise, I'm okay with that.
Once and for all, after 40 years, time for the Chipmunks to die.
Much more than 40 years, I'm sorry to tell you.
Yeah, I guess it is. The hula hoop song, right?
Well, 60, I think 50.
The Christmas hula hoop song, I think it was 1959, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that was their big hit, but I think they were actually around before that. So, yes, they're old. They should be in a retirement home, and that's exactly where I want them to be.
Anyway, moving back to your deal suggestion.
Yes. So the last minute gift deals, we talked about cards. We talked about the fact that you can send virtual cards. I did this a lot last year, quite frankly. On the Christmas day, there were a couple of people who sent me a present, and I was like, oh, I didn't get anything. Hey, Starbucks cards. Or actually the coffee shop that was most popular in the region that they lived in, which wasn't always Starbucks. So that, I went on Amazon and I patted myself on the back for having that Amazon Prime membership. We talk about this a little bit in the article, but most of the year we spend a lot of time going, Amazon is bankrupting themselves. They're really treating their stockholders bad. And let's not even talk about authors and publishers. But then around Christmas we go,
okay, yeah.
You know, that 2-day shipping is pretty awesome.
That's really nice.
Oh, we're total hypocrites on this.
Well, no, we're not. Both points are valid. Amazon will squeak out a holiday profit.
Yeah, and in some cities, like New York City, they'll give it to you the same day.
And near Washington, D.C., that accidentally happened to me the other day. I ordered something, and 4 hours later, I'm like, oh, well, hell, here it is.
That is as close to teleportation as we'll probably live to see.
I agree.
But yeah, there are other companies that can also do very fast shipping because honestly, it's not Amazon that personally ships it to you yet. I mentioned in the article that someday drones will just come by and strafe your house with presents.
And just airdrop.
Yeah. And kids will think that's Santa. Hey, look, there's Santa.
Hey, look, it's the Amazon drone.
Santa's on.
Oh, Merry Christmas.
Oh, you've ruined Christmas. All right. But no, you don't ruin Christmas. You save Christmas because your presents arrive on time. So that's something. There are some great last minute deals. But one of the things that we talked about, and we should have talked about a little bit more, is that the not empty promise is actually a great Christmas present. You know, you absolutely don't have anything. You can't even leave the house to go down to the 7-Eleven to get some iTunes cards. You
That's
can
so
say,
sad. The 7-Eleven for iTunes cards.
Don't knock it, man. Terrible. They sometimes have some pretty good sales on those.
Okay, sorry. Professional veneer here. Here we go.
Well, it used to be peanut brittle. That used to be the last minute present. But anyway, you can come up to them and say, look, you know, hopefully you have at least a card to give them something. But you come up to them and say, look, tell you what, I couldn't do this before Christmas, but I tell you what, after the stores are reopened, we will go down and get you a puppy.
A puppy. Whoa.
Or something, right? A diamond ring, you know? I mean, it literally is like that Papa's Gonna Buy You song. But that works. It works, particularly if the thing that you're promising them is terribly expensive. They will overlook the fact that they did not get it on the day because they'll have it before New Year's. So yeah, that's a good strategy. We went over a few others, but you know what? With the slightest bit of advanced planning, really, you can come up with some really good stuff. I have to say, this year, I think one of the big accessories is going to be, that's going to do very well, is battery packs for iPhones and Android phones. And
in general, I think you're right.
If there's a person who is addicted to their phone in your family, it's a great present, and the prices on them are insane. MacNN Deals just, I think yesterday or today, had a 26,000 milliamp brick that you can charge your iPhone 6 Plus or your Galaxy Note 5 times over, and it was $40 or less.
Nice.
It's crazy. We have seen some other crazy prices, but of course, the biggest one that we've been drawing attention to, we mentioned last week, is $100 off an Apple Watch. If you've been on the fence about that.
Yeah, and that's the thing. $249 for the smaller size is a stunning deal, no matter where you get it from.
And last but not least, if you just don't know this person, you need to buy them a present, or a coworker or something like that, not a family member. But you need to buy this person a present, but you just have no idea what they actually really like, and you don't want to get them a gift certificate, Bluetooth speaker. There's every size, every price point, every quality level, quite frankly. We've reviewed like 100 of them so far.
Yeah, and if you need someone to talk to, give Amber an email.
Yeah.
Because she's got a wall of them. She has a wall of sound at this point.
But, it's the modern day pair of socks sort of present. Inoffensive, probably not what they would have specifically asked for, but could be useful.
Yep.
And because almost everybody has a phone, and you know what? Actually, we've discovered as we've tested these that this stuff turns out to be handy more often than you'd think. I, for example, have a Bluetooth speaker, the Ultimate Ears Mega Boom, and it is waterproof. So that means that I can finally have tunes in the bathroom. Yeah. Right, without destroying my phone from steam. Yeah.
Okay.
And so that's one use. Recently, I was at a Christmas party, and somebody was trying to play Christmas music on their phone, just on their phone. And, you could hear it for all of 4 inches away from that phone. And I said, I have a little Bluetooth speaker in the car.
Little. You have a little Bluetooth speaker.
Yeah, not the same.
Mega Boom!
Not the same one, a different one. I have a little Bluetooth speaker as well. And it's about the size of a can of Budweiser. And why did I go there? Anyway, yeah, it is.
I don't know.
And we brought it in and we paired it up with their phone in like 2 seconds. And suddenly everyone could hear the Christmas music. It wasn't overpoweringly loud. It was perfect for this
useful.
Little casual gathering. We just wanted a soundtrack. And there it was.
They are super useful. And they range in price. And you're right, quality from 10 to many hundreds of dollars.
Ridiculously high, but yes.
And depending what you need, get what you need. There's an argument for getting 6 $10 ones and handing them all over in a 6-pack.
Yeah, exactly. You're right. They're this year's thumb drive. That's what they are.
Yep.
Speaking of which, if you are going to give somebody a thumb drive, there's only 2 that you should be considering. One of them is USB 3-speed thumb drives, not the USB 2-speed dudes. Those are uncool. And then the Star Wars thumb drives.
Well, actually, I'm going to differ with you on a little bit. VisionTech and other companies like Otherworld Computing have solid-state thumb drives.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And those are basically SSDs in a larger package. I think the thumb drives, when they first launched, they're like 16 megabytes and huge.
Yeah.
Megabytes. 16 megabytes and huge, okay? It's about that size. I mean, this is literally the size of my thumb. It's got 120 gigabytes on it. It's about $79. Way faster than the slower flash media that they put in, the little tiny, like the Atom drives and things like that.
Yeah. So. And one present that was brought up in the MacNN Deals guide that I thought was seasonally appropriate was the Backtrack VO smartphone breathalyzer. Well, let's face it, we're all going to a lot of Christmas parties now. New Year's parties are just around the corner.
At some point, yep.
Yeah. But all kidding aside, this could, save you, at the very minimum, an expensive ticket or somebody you know. So, yeah, it's actually not a bad idea. Yep. And it seems to me like it was around $50 or $40 or so. So,
maybe not so
you got
bad.
Somebody who loves their eggnog. Maybe that. Maybe that. Up here in Canada, we have a thing called Boxing Week. Not Boxing Day.
Week? When did that start?
Week. Well, the merchants just can't say no. And that is the Canadian Black Friday does exist up here, but it's very, very limited compared to the United States. Fewer deaths for a start. Less fighting, polite Canadians. But we have Boxing Week, which is where we get all that aggression out. And so, it's a week-long sale in that dead week between Christmas and New Year's. Finally, somebody does something with that dead week. All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's wrap. Yeah. Merry Christmas, everybody.
Yeah. On behalf of all the staff of MacNN, we hope you have a very Merry Christmas, or, well, Hanukkah's well over, but Kwanzaa's coming up, and whatever else you may celebrate. Maybe it's just winter solstice, but that's fine with us.
But wait, there's one more thing.
Oh, there is one more thing. All right, and now we finally get to it. The cherry on top of the panettone, the fruit in the cake, you might say. The stocking hung over the fireplace. William Gallagher.
The fruit in the cake. Nice.
William Gallagher and his app of the week. William, what do you have for us this time?
I used to have this whole bank of monitors connected to my Mac Pro, 2006 Mac Pro. I was NASA until the day came that I bought an iMac, and it made all my old displays look rubbish. And in pushing those screens aside to just plug in the iMac, I discovered a window and this daylight thing you might have heard about. From that day forward, I was a one-screen man, and I was very happy with it until about last Tuesday. I have an iPad Pro, and I've become used to having that on my desk and not really using it much while it's there. Now, with Duet Display, if I connect that iPad Pro to my Mac with just a regular lightning cable, my Mac has 2 screens. That's it. That's all. My iMac has another screen. I can drag windows over to it. I can leave Photoshop toolbars there. I can run mail in that window and leave the main screen for concentrating on my work. There are some oddities, such as OS X occasionally gets confused for a minute and it will put my overextended dock onto the iPad Pro's smaller screen rather than the Mac's 27-inch one. But actually, all that really did is show me that the iPad Pro screen is so clear and precise that my iMac display feels rubbish. Duet Display is made by ex-Apple engineers, and when you see how naturally it fits into the Mac, how well it works, you'll believe the makers from Apple, but you won't believe they aren't still there. You need a Duet Display app for your Mac and for your iPad. iPad 1 is free, and the Mac edition is currently on sale for just $10.
All right, well, that wraps it up for episode 45 of the MacNN podcast, the last MacNN podcast for 2015, but we will be back in 2016 because the tech news, it slows down sometimes, but it just never stops.
Yeah, you know what? Starting our first episode of 2016, we're going to be starting to talk about the Consumer Electronics Show.
Yeah, oh, God, no.
Welcome to the jungle, baby.
Do you remember that year when they took the lower level of the Las Vegas Convention Center and the upper level was an Adult Video Industry Awards?
It was like that for very many years. And that's only very recently changed.
Those were the days.
You want to talk culture clash? There you go.
You want to talk booth babes? Oh, there you go. Anyway, they don't do that anymore.
No, they don't.
No. Anyway, on behalf of the entire staff, we won't be talking to you again until 2016. So have a merry holiday, have a happy new year, and we will see you then. Managing editor Mike over there, say goodnight.
Good night, everybody, and happy holidays.
And once again, thank you so much for supporting us through these last 45 episodes. Here's to many more, everybody. Cheers.
Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.
We're some podcast doing mofos, man.